Carl Reynolds had never been the type to worry about paperwork. He had lived in his home for 10 years, enjoying the quiet, predictable rhythm of suburban life. His neighborhood wasn't part of a homeowners association, and that was exactly why he had chosen it. No ridiculous rules about lawn height, no monthly fees, no power-hungry board members breathing down his neck about the color of his front door. It was just a normal street where people minded their own business and took care of their homes in their own way. That's why, when he pulled a thick envelope from his mailbox one crisp autumn morning, his first reaction was confusion. The return address had an official-looking stamp from a law office he didn't recognize. He tore it open, standing at the curb, expecting maybe some kind of mistake, a misdelivered letter and notice meant for a neighbor. But as he unfolded the document inside, his stomach dropped. Notice of foreclosure proceedings. The words practically leaped off the page. His eyes scanned the text frantically, trying to make sense of what he was reading. According to the letter, he was being sued by Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association for failure to pay dues. Homeowners Association fees amounting to over $9,000. The letter stated that multiple notices had been sent, none of which he had ever received, and that due to non-payment, legal action had been taken to foreclose on his home. Carl felt his pulse quicken. This had to be some kind of clerical error. He couldn't even remember the last time he had dealt with anything related to an HOA. He had specifically avoided buying a house in an association-controlled neighborhood. He knew every single person on his street, and not a single one of them had ever mentioned belonging to any homeowners association. He walked back inside, gripping the letter tightly. Maybe it was just a simple mix-up, some other unlucky Carl Reynolds who actually owed money to these people. But as he sat down at his kitchen table rereading the document, a sinking feeling settled in his chest. His name, his address, everything was correct. After a deep breath, he grabbed his phone and called the number listed at the bottom of the letter. It rang twice before a robotic voice answered. "Thank you for calling the law office of Bell and Grayson, attorneys for Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association. Please hold while we connect your call." A tiny piano version of Fur Elise played as he waited, his fingers tapping anxiously against the table. Finally, after what felt like forever, a woman's voice came on the line. "Bell and Grayson Law Offices. This is Lisa. How can I help you?" "Yeah, hi. I just got a letter saying that Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association is foreclosing on my house for unpaid fees, but there's a problem. I'm not part of Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association. I don't even live in that neighborhood." There was a pause, then a sigh, as if she had heard this complaint 100 times before. "Sir, we have documentation showing that your property is within the jurisdiction of the Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association. If you'd like to dispute the claim, you will need to submit a formal response in writing before the court date." Carl's grip on the phone tightened. "That's impossible. I've lived here for 10 years. My house was never part of an homeowners association. I was never informed of any change. How can they just decide that I owe them money?" "Sir, the Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association updated its charter to include additional properties in the surrounding area. Notices were sent to all affected homeowners. If you did not receive them, I suggest you take that up with the Homeowners Association Board." Carl's mind raced. Updated its charter to include properties outside its original boundaries? That wasn't how homeowners associations worked. At least it shouldn't be. "Who do I talk to about this?" he asked, his voice sharper now. "You'll need to contact the Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association directly," Lisa replied, already sounding bored. "Their contact information should be listed in your letter." Carl ended the call without another word, his hands shaking with anger. He flipped through the packet looking for a phone number, finding it buried in the fine print on the last page. Without hesitating, he dialed. It rang and rang. Then finally, a voice smug, slow, and drenched in condescension answered. "Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association. This is Robert Harris, Homeowners Association President. How may I assist you?" Carl clenched his jaw. "Yeah, you can start by explaining why your homeowners association thinks it has the right to charge me fees for a community I don't belong to and never agreed to be a part of." There was a long silence. Then Harris chuckled, a low, knowing laugh. "Ah, Mr. Reynolds, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. I assume you've received our notice." Carl's stomach twisted. There was something off about this man's tone, like he had been expecting this call and was enjoying the power he had over the situation. "Yeah, I got your notice. Now explain to me why I'm on the receiving end of a foreclosure lawsuit from a homeowners association I never signed up for." Harris sighed theatrically. "Oh, Mr. Reynolds, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Hickory Ridge recently expanded its jurisdiction to ensure a more uniform community standard in the surrounding area. We sent multiple notices to all newly inducted homeowners, including yourself. Unfortunately, failure to pay the mandatory membership fees does carry consequences." Carl's vision blurred with fury. "You mean to tell me you just decided my house is now part of your homeowners association and are trying to steal my home over it?" Harris made a sympathetic noise, the kind someone makes when they aren't actually sympathetic. "I wouldn't put it that way. The community votes on these changes. It's all perfectly legal." Carl stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled over. "Legal my ass? I never agreed to this. I never signed anything, and I will not be paying you a dime." "Well," Harris said, his voice silky smooth, "that's up to the court now, isn't it?" Carl slammed his phone down on the table. This wasn't just some paperwork mistake. This was a scam. If they thought he was just going to roll over and let them take his house, they had another thing coming. Carl sat in front of his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He had spent the last 2 hours scouring property records, legal codes, and anything else he could find related to Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association. Nothing made sense. His house was not part of their development. It had never been. He pulled up a satellite map of the area. Hickory Ridge was a gated community, a completely separate neighborhood from his. The closest house in their subdivision was at least a mile away. There was no possible way that his home could fall under their jurisdiction. His heart pounded as he clicked through the county land records, and then he saw it, a document filed just 6 months ago, listing an amendment to Hickory Ridge's governing charter. The amendment expanded the homeowners association's boundaries, annexing an entire row of houses that had nothing to do with their community, and his address was right in the middle of it. Carl exhaled sharply, trying to process what he was seeing. How the hell had this been allowed? Could a homeowners association really just expand its reach like that? And how had no one in his neighborhood raised hell over it? He flipped to the signatures at the bottom of the document. The names were unfamiliar except for one: Robert Harris, Homeowners Association President. Carl clenched his jaw. Harris had done this. This wasn't just some bureaucratic mistake. It was deliberate. And that meant there had to be a reason. Carl opened another tab and started digging into Harris himself. A quick search pulled up his LinkedIn profile. Homeowners Association President, former real estate developer, a long history of property acquisitions for community development projects. Then Carl found something more interesting: a lawsuit from 5 years ago. A couple had sued Harris and his former development firm for fraud. The case had been settled out of court, but the allegations were eerily similar to what was happening now. Harris had a pattern. Carl kept digging, and that's when he found the real bombshell. A local news article from 3 months ago. Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association acquires 6 homes in land dispute, sells to developer for record profit. His blood ran cold. This was a scheme, a scam. Harris and the Homeowners Association Board had done this before. They had quietly annexed homes, hit the homeowners with bogus fees, and when people either couldn't pay or fought back, the Homeowners Association foreclosed on their properties. And then, like magic, those homes ended up in the hands of a private developer and were later resold for double their original value. Carl's stomach twisted. This wasn't about Homeowners Association fees. They wanted his house, and if he didn't do something, they were going to take it. The next morning, Carl got in his car and drove straight to the county recorder's office. He needed to see the original deed to his home. If there was anything legally tying him to Hickory Ridge, it would be on record. The clerk, a middle-aged woman named Janet, gave him a skeptical look when he explained his situation. "A homeowners association tried to annex your property?" she asked, flipping through her computer. "They claim they did," Carl said. "I need to see if there's any legal basis for it." Janet frowned and typed something into her system. A few moments later, she shook her head. "There's nothing here that shows your property was ever part of Hickory Ridge. Your house is in a separately zoned area. No homeowners association jurisdiction." Carl exhaled, relieved but only for a second. Then how the hell are they doing this? Janet clicked around a little more, then suddenly froze. Oh, Carl's stomach dropped. Oh. Janet turned the screen toward him. There is an updated map from 6 months ago. Hickory Ridge filed a land expansion amendment. That's the document listing your property under their control. Carl leaned in. The map had been altered. A red boundary line now looped around his home and a handful of others, connecting them to the Hickory Ridge subdivision. This isn't legal, right? Carl asked, his voice tight. Janet hesitated. Normally, no, but if they got approval from the county zoning board. Carl ran a hand through his hair. And if they did that? Janet sighed. Then they broke the law. Carl spent the next few hours tracking down other homeowners who had been caught in the homeowners association scheme. He knocked on doors, called neighbors, even posted in local community forums. Most of the people he reached out to had no idea they had even been annexed into Hickory Ridge's jurisdiction. A few had already been hit with fees, but had paid them just to avoid trouble. Others had received threatening letters just like Carl. One elderly couple, Tom and Linda Garvey, had already lost their home. The fees kept coming. Tom told Carl, his voice trembling with frustration. First $100, then $500, then $2,000. We kept trying to fight it, but they kept adding penalties, legal fees, until one day we got a foreclosure notice. The house was gone before we even had a chance to stop it. Carl felt a lump in his throat. Where did it go? Tom scoffed bitterly. Some developer bought it at auction for pennies on the dollar. Now they're flipping it for triple what we paid. Carl clenched his fists. He knew exactly who the developer was, Harris. This wasn't just about him anymore. Harris and the corrupt homeowners association were systematically stealing homes and getting away with it. Carl wasn't going to let them get away with it. It was time to fight back. Carl knew that fighting the homeowners association in court was going to be an uphill battle. He had seen what had happened to the Garveys, crushed by fines, drowned in legal threats, and ultimately forced out of their own home. If he wanted to win, he needed a strategy. He needed a lawyer who wasn't afraid to take on a corrupt homeowners association. He spent the next few days calling attorneys, but the conversations all went the same way. The moment he mentioned fighting a homeowners association, the lawyers either quoted ridiculously high fees or outright refused to take the case. It was infuriating. Then, on his 8th call, he finally got a different reaction. Homeowners association fraud? The man on the other end of the line asked, his tone shifting. Tell me more. Carl leaned forward at his kitchen table. They annexed my home without my consent, hit me with thousands in fees, and are now trying to steal my house through foreclosure. There was a pause. Then the lawyer chuckled. Mr. Reynolds, you just described exactly how these corrupt homeowners associations operate. I've been handling cases like yours for years. My name's Ethan Caldwell, and I'd be happy to represent you. Carl exhaled in relief. I need to stop them before it's too late. Caldwell's voice turned serious. Then we need to act fast. Homeowners associations thrive on intimidation. If they think you'll just roll over, they'll bulldoze right over you. But if we hit back hard and fast, we might be able to stop them before they gain too much ground. Carl nodded, determination settling in. Tell me what to do. 2 days later, Carl met with Caldwell at his law office. The lawyer was a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and an air of quiet confidence. He flipped through the stack of documents Carl had brought. Foreclosure notices, the Homeowners Association amendment, property records. This is illegal as hell, Caldwell muttered, jabbing a finger at the zoning map. They filed this without proper approval. I guarantee you they skipped public hearings. That's a violation of county land use laws. So how do we prove it? Carl asked. We file a motion to dismiss the foreclosure, citing fraudulent jurisdiction. But that's just the first step. We also sue the Homeowners Association for damages, wrongful foreclosure, fraud, and extortion. And if we can find proof of collusion between them and the zoning board, Caldwell smirked. We take the whole thing down.
Carl felt a flicker of hope. How soon can we file? Caldwell leaned back. I'll have the paperwork ready by tomorrow. But brace yourself. Once the Homeowners Association realizes you're fighting back, they're going to escalate. Carl's jaw tightened. Let them try. The next morning, Caldwell filed the motion in court. By noon, Carl got his first taste of the Homeowners Association's retaliation. He stepped outside to find a bright orange violation notice slapped onto his front door. Notice of noncompliance. Property in violation of Homeowners Association regulations. Carl ripped it off, scanning the list of supposed infractions. Grass height exceeds regulation limit. Unapproved trash bin placement. Unregistered vehicle in driveway. Failure to display Homeowners Association compliant mailbox. He laughed bitterly. His grass was trimmed. His trash bin was exactly where it had always been, and his mailbox had been there for 10 years. As for the unregistered vehicle, of course, it was his own damn car. The Homeowners Association wasn't even trying to be subtle. They were manufacturing violations to pile on fines and drown him in paperwork. His phone buzzed. It was Caldwell. They started already, didn't they? The lawyer asked. Yeah, Carl muttered, waving the notice in the air. They're throwing every fake violation they can think of at me. Caldwell sighed. That's textbook Homeowners Association warfare. They hit you with small petty fines, hoping you'll get overwhelmed and cave. Well, I'm not caving. Good. Keep every notice they send you. We'll use them as evidence of retaliatory harassment. Carl's blood boiled. The Homeowners Association was playing dirty, but they underestimated him. He wasn't about to let some power-hungry board of self-appointed dictators walk all over him. The next attack came 2 days later. Carl was working in his garage when he heard a loud clanking sound outside. He walked to his driveway and his stomach dropped. His truck was being towed. Hey, what the hell are you doing? Carl shouted, running toward the tow truck. A short, balding man in a security uniform smirked at him. Your vehicle is in violation of Homeowners Association parking restrictions, he said lazily, handing Carl a slip of paper. Carl snatched it and read the bogus charge. Unauthorized commercial vehicle parked on residential property. This isn't a commercial vehicle. Carl snapped. It's my personal truck. The tow driver shrugged. Take it up with the Homeowners Association. Carl gritted his teeth as the truck was hauled away. Fury bubbled in his chest. This wasn't just about a vehicle. They wanted to make his life miserable until he gave up. But all they had done was make him angrier. Caldwell was waiting for him at the courthouse the next day. I filed an emergency injunction to stop the foreclosure, he said, handing Carl a document. And I got the judge to freeze all fines and penalties until the case is resolved. Carl's eyes widened. So that means they can't enforce any violations until we get a ruling. No more fake fines. No more harassment. They just lost their biggest weapon. For the first time in weeks, Carl felt like he could breathe. But Caldwell wasn't done. He leaned in, his voice dropping. Now, let's take this a step further. If we can prove the Homeowners Association knowingly forged documents or colluded with officials, we can hit them with criminal charges. Carl's pulse quickened. You think we can? Caldwell smirked. Let's find out. The next phase of the battle had begun. The Homeowners Association had come at him with everything they had: harassment, fines, even stealing his truck. But Carl wasn't just going to defend himself anymore. Now he was going on the offensive, and he was going to make sure Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association paid for everything they had done. Carl barely had time to enjoy the small victory of freezing the Homeowners Association's fines before they struck back harder and dirtier than ever. It started the very next morning. He stepped outside to grab his mail and froze. His entire front yard was torn up. The lush green grass that he had mowed just days ago was gone, replaced by a mess of upturned soil and deep trenches. His flower beds had been ripped out, his walkway lined with chunks of broken concrete. Carl's jaw clenched. He looked up and down the street. No signs of construction anywhere, just his yard. Then he saw it. A white Homeowners Association violation notice stapled to the remains of his mailbox. Unauthorized landscaping. Homeowners Association compliance action taken. Carl's fist curled. They had destroyed his yard. It wasn't just a warning. This time they were trying to break him. His phone was already in his hand before he realized it. He dialed Caldwell. They dug up my yard, he said, the moment the lawyer answered. Caldwell swore under his breath. I had a feeling they'd pull something drastic. This is vandalism. Carl snapped. They have no right to do this. They'll claim it was an enforcement action. Some homeowners associations have emergency provisions that allow them to correct violations without owner approval. It's a legal gray area, but they still overstepped. Carl exhaled through his nose, trying to stay calm. So what do we do? Caldwell's voice hardened. We hit back harder. An hour later, Caldwell and Carl stood on the sidewalk, surveying the damage. Caldwell snapped pictures from every angle, muttering curses under his breath. They left no paper trail, he said. No notice beforehand. No contractor signs. They did this illegally and tried to cover their tracks. Carl crossed his arms. So how do we prove it was them? We find out who approved it and who carried it out, Caldwell said. Carl turned to him. I still have contacts at the county office. Caldwell nodded. Good. Let's find out if this landscaping action was even filed legally. Later that afternoon, Carl met Janet, the county clerk who had helped him before. She sighed when he explained the latest development. Carl, this is getting out of hand, she muttered, shaking her head. Let's see if they pulled a permit for any kind of work on your property. A few minutes later, she frowned at the screen. There's nothing for your address. Carl's stomach twisted. Not even a request. Janet clicked around. Not for your address, but... She paused. There was a bulk permit request for homeowners association-mandated landscaping corrections filed 2 weeks ago. Carl's heartbeat quickened. Who filed it? She squinted at the document, then cursed under her breath. Robert Harris. Carl gritted his teeth. Of course, it was him. Janet scrolled further. Wait, this is strange. What? She pointed at a note in the permit details. They listed the properties affected, but yours wasn't on the list. Carl blinked. So even if the county approved this, they had no legal reason to touch my yard. Janet nodded. If they acted outside of the listed properties, then yes, they had no legal grounds to do this. Carl exhaled. Can you send me a copy? Janet clicked a few buttons. Done. Carl grinned. Janet, you just gave me exactly what I needed, armed with the permit records. Caldwell filed a formal complaint with the county that same day. Within 24 hours, an inspector was sent to Carl's house. The county representative, a stiff-looking man in a navy suit, surveyed the damage with a grimace. This is excessive.
Carl crossed his arms. And illegal. The inspector nodded. I'll be filing a report. If they went beyond the scope of their permit, there will be penalties. Carl didn't even try to hide his satisfaction. Good. The next day, the Homeowners Association Board received a cease and desist order from the county. Any further action against Carl's property would result in fines and potential criminal charges. For the first time since this nightmare started, Carl felt like he was winning. But the Homeowners Association wasn't done with him yet. The next escalation came at night. Carl was asleep when a loud crashing sound jolted him awake. Heart pounding, he grabbed his phone and ran to the front window. His garage door was dented inward, metal crumpled like someone had rammed it. His trash cans were knocked over, contents spilled across his driveway. And at the edge of his lawn, a brick with a note taped to it. Carl's stomach churned as he stepped outside, snatched the note, and unfolded it. Leave it alone. This isn't your fight. His finger tightened around the paper. They were threatening him now. Carl wasn't an idiot. He knew this wasn't just some random act of vandalism. The Homeowners Association had gotten desperate. Caldwell was furious when he heard. This is the move of someone who knows they're losing. Carl's jaw clenched. I'm filing a police report. Good, Caldwell said. And while you do that, I'm filing for a restraining order against the Homeowners Association Board. Carl raised an eyebrow. We can do that? Damn right we can. You're being harassed, threatened, and targeted. We'll argue that their actions put you at physical risk. That evening, Carl installed security cameras around his property. If the Homeowners Association tried anything else, he'd have it on tape. But the real blow came the next morning when he got a call from Caldwell. They just made a huge mistake. Carl frowned. What happened? Caldwell laughed. I just got word from the judge. Our restraining order was approved. Harris and the Homeowners Association Board are now legally forbidden from interacting with you. Carl grinned. So if they try anything, they'll be in contempt of court? Carl exhaled, tension finally easing from his shoulders. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he had the upper hand. But something in Caldwell's tone made him pause. What is it? Caldwell hesitated. I just got a tip from someone in the county office. There's more to this than we thought. Carl's pulse quickened. What do you mean? There's a paper trail. Someone inside the zoning board helped push this expansion through, and if we can prove it, Carl's heart pounded. Then we don't just stop the Homeowners Association. Caldwell finished for him. We take the whole damn thing down. Carl sat in Caldwell's office, his leg bouncing anxiously as the lawyer sifted through a fresh stack of documents. The restraining order had given him some breathing room, but Caldwell's last words had kept him on edge. A paper trail inside the zoning board, something bigger than just the Homeowners Association's greed. Caldwell finally exhaled, setting the papers down. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Carl, we got them. Carl straightened. How bad is it? Caldwell smirked. Very. He picked up one document and tapped it. This is a zoning variance approval form. It was signed by one man, Robert Harris. Carl frowned. So he forged it? Worse, Caldwell flipped to another document. The county zoning board was never even involved. The Homeowners Association expansion was never approved through proper channels. Harris got a single zoning officer, a guy named William Trent, to rubber stamp it, skipping the normal process entirely. Carl's blood boiled. So they knew it was illegal? Caldwell nodded. Oh, they knew. And Trent got paid off for looking the other way. He slid over a bank statement. $5,000 deposited into his account 1 week before the expansion was filed. Carl's fists clenched. Bribery. Fraud. Extortion. Harris is done. Not just Harris. Caldwell's grin was almost wicked. We're going to expose every single person involved, and we're going to do it publicly. The next day, Caldwell filed a lawsuit against Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association, naming Harris and 3 other board members in a civil suit for fraud, wrongful foreclosure, and harassment. But that was only the beginning. He also filed a criminal complaint with the district attorney's office, providing evidence of bribery and falsified zoning documents. Within hours, local news stations were running the story. Explosive allegations against Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association. Homeowners fight back. Carl watched as reporters swarmed the Hickory Ridge entrance, demanding statements. Board members scrambled, dodging questions. Harris was nowhere to be found. The county stepped in the next morning. A special hearing was called by the county commissioner to investigate zoning corruption. Carl sat in the back of the packed room as Harris, looking pale and exhausted, tried to defend himself. It was a misunderstanding, Harris insisted, his voice tight. The Homeowners Association was only acting in the best interests of the community. The commissioner wasn't buying it. Mr. Harris, the documents presented show clear evidence of fraudulent expansion, falsified approvals, and financial misconduct. Do you deny these charges? Harris opened his mouth, but before he could respond, the doors swung open. A pair of sheriff's deputies walked in. The room fell silent. One of them stepped forward. Robert Harris, you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and bribery. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the deputies cuffed him right there. Carl sat back, arms crossed, feeling a surge of triumph. Justice. In the following weeks, the entire Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association collapsed. The county revoked their fraudulent expansion, nullifying all fake fines and foreclosures. The homeowners who had lost their properties, including Tom and Linda Garvey, were given the right to reclaim them. The remaining Homeowners Association board members resigned in disgrace. William Trent, the bribe zoning officer, was fired and charged, and Harris faced multiple felony charges and a civil lawsuit that would leave him financially ruined. 3 months later, Carl stood on his front lawn, now fully restored, as Caldwell handed him the final court ruling. It's over, the lawyer said with a satisfied grin. Carl scanned the document. The court had ruled in his favor on every count. The The homeowners association was ordered to pay $500,000 in damages, not just to him, but to every homeowner they had targeted. Carl exhaled, the weight on his shoulders finally lifting. "Feels good, doesn't it?" Caldwell asked. Carl smirked. "Damn right it does." He turned, looking at his house, the home he had nearly lost. He had fought back, he had won, and now Hickory Ridge Homeowners Association was nothing but a cautionary tale. And Carl Reynolds was the man who had taken them down. I hope you enjoyed the story with the changes. Would you like to add or modify anything else?